The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor as her hand struck my face. Everyone at the elite wedding reception froze, but what they didn't know was that my billionaire husband had been watching from the shadows, and what happened next would change everything. Before we dive into this shocking story of revenge and justice, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Let's get started. My name is Florence, and I need to tell you about the night that changed my life forever. You see, marrying into wealth isn't like the fairy tales make it seem. Sometimes the real monsters aren't dragons or evil stepmothers. They're the people who think they can treat you badly just because you come from a different world. I met William at a charity auction 3 years ago. I was there as a volunteer, helping coordinate the silent auction items, and he was there as one of the biggest donors. I'll never forget the moment our eyes met across that crowded ballroom. He was bidding on a painting, something I'd never be able to afford even if I saved for years. And when he won it, he walked straight over to me and said, "I think this would look beautiful in your apartment." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but William never jokes about things like that. Our romance was like something out of a movie. He pursued me with a gentleness I'd never experienced before. William never made me feel small because of my background. I was a kindergarten teacher from a middle-class family, and he was the heir to a business empire worth billions. But when we were together, none of that seemed to matter. He would pick me up after work in his regular car, not one of his luxury vehicles, and we'd go to small cafes and local restaurants. He said he loved seeing the world through my eyes, away from the artificial glitter of his usual social circle. When he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. I loved him deeply, and I truly believed that love would be enough to bridge any gap between our worlds. The wedding was beautiful, intimate, and perfect. But the real test came after, when I had to navigate the complex web of his business associates and their families. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Anthony, William's business partner and closest friend, was marrying his longtime girlfriend, Rachel. This wasn't just any wedding. It was being called the wedding of the year. The venue was breathtaking, a historic mansion with crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and gardens that looked like they belonged in a palace. As we walked through the grand entrance, I felt that familiar flutter of nervousness in my stomach. These events always made me feel like I was wearing a costume that didn't quite fit. William looked handsome in his tailored suit, and he squeezed my hand as we entered the reception hall. "You look stunning," he whispered in my ear, and I felt a little more confident in my cream-colored dress. It wasn't designer, I'd found it at a boutique downtown, but William always made me feel beautiful regardless of the price tag. The reception was in full swing when we arrived. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter echoed off the high ceilings, and everyone seemed to glide across the room with the kind of effortless grace that comes from a lifetime of privilege. I recognized many faces from previous events, the same circle of wealthy families who had known each other for generations. And then I saw her. Catherine, Anthony's older sister, was holding court near the champagne fountain, wearing a stunning silver gown that probably cost more than my annual salary. She was the protective older sister who had never quite approved of anyone in Anthony's life, and she seemed to view me with particular disdain. It wasn't anything she said directly. Catherine was too well-bred for outright confrontation. Instead, she had perfected the art of subtle cruelty, the kind that left you questioning whether you'd imagined the insult. "Florence, darling," she called out as we approached, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "How lovely to see you. That's such a charming dress. Very appropriate for someone with your background." The words hit their mark perfectly. She'd managed to compliment and insult me simultaneously, and everyone within earshot understood the implication. William's jaw tightened slightly, but before he could respond, Anthony appeared to whisk him away for some urgent business discussion about a deal they were finalizing. "I'll be right back," he promised, kissing my cheek. I watched him go, feeling suddenly exposed and vulnerable in the sea of designer gowns and perfectly coiffed hair. Catherine wasted no time. You know, Florence, I've been thinking about what an interesting choice Anthony made in business partners. William seems generous, very generous with his affections. Her friends tittered behind their champagne glasses, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. The implication was clear. She was suggesting that William's business success was somehow tied to his personal relationships. William is an excellent businessman, I replied quietly, trying to maintain my composure. And Anthony is lucky to have such a skilled partner. Oh, I'm sure he is, Catherine said with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Though I do worry about mixing business with social obligations. It can get so complicated when people from different worlds try to blend together, don't you think? The conversation continued like this for what felt like hours. Catherine would make cutting remarks disguised as friendly conversation, and I would try to respond with dignity while feeling smaller and smaller. Other guests joined in occasionally, their comments ranging from patronizing to outright dismissive. They talked about charity events I couldn't afford to attend, vacation homes in places I'd never been, and investment opportunities that would never be available to someone like me. What made it worse was that I could see Catherine's motivation. She wasn't just being cruel for the sake of it, she was protecting what she saw as her family's interests. In her mind, I was an outsider who had infiltrated their world through marriage, and my presence somehow diminished their social standing. She saw me as a threat to the carefully constructed hierarchy that had always existed in their circle. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment to collect myself. Standing in front of the ornate mirror, I took deep breaths and reminded myself why I was here. I loved William, and he loved me. That had to be enough. I couldn't let Catherine's cruelty drive me away from supporting my husband at his best friend's wedding. When I returned to the reception, I decided to get a drink and find a quiet corner to wait for William to finish his business discussion. The champagne table was beautifully arranged with crystal glasses and elegant bottles, and I reached for a glass of what looked like white wine. As I turned to leave, I bumped directly into Catherine. The collision was entirely accidental, but the glass in my hand tilted, and red wine splashed across the front of her silver designer gown. The dark stains spread across the expensive fabric like spilled blood, and Catherine's face went white with shock before turning bright red with fury. "You clumsy fool!" she shrieked, loud enough for half the reception to hear. "This dress cost more than you made in a year as a teacher. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I immediately started apologizing, grabbing napkins from the nearest table and trying to help clean the stain. "Catherine, I'm so sorry. It was an accident. Please let me help." "Don't touch me," she snapped, pushing my hands away. "You've done enough damage. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You don't belong here. You're like a bull in a china shop, destroying everything around you because you don't understand how to behave in civilized society." A circle had formed around us, with guests watching the spectacle with a mixture of horror and fascination. I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Catherine, please, I truly am sorry. I can pay for the cleaning or replacement if necessary." "Pay for it?" Catherine laughed harshly. "With what money? Your teacher's salary? This dress is worth more than your entire wardrobe combined. You think you can just waltz into our world, marry someone wealthy, and pretend you're one of us? You're nothing but a common little teacher who got lucky." The words hit me like physical blows. I could feel the stares of everyone around us, could hear the whispered conversations starting to buzz through the crowd. This was my worst nightmare. Being publicly humiliated at Anthony's wedding, being exposed as the outsider I'd always felt myself to be. "I never pretended to be anything other than what I am," I said quietly, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm. "I'm sorry about your dress, and I'm sorry you feel the need to be so cruel on your brother's wedding day." That's when Catherine's facade of civilized behavior completely crumbled. Her face twisted with rage, and she raised her hand. "How dare you lecture me about my brother's wedding? You're the one who's ruining it by being here." The slap came so fast I barely saw it coming. The sharp crack echoed through the reception hall, and the pain exploded across my cheek. My head snapped to the side, and I stumbled backward, my hand instinctively rising to my burning face. The entire room went silent. Not a single person moved or spoke. Even the band seemed to sense the tension and gradually stopped playing. I stood there, my cheek throbbing, my eyes wide with shock and humiliation. Catherine stood over me, her chest heaving with anger, her hand still raised as if she might strike again. "That's what happens when you forget your place," she hissed. "You're not family, Florence. You're not one of us. You're just a temporary inconvenience that will eventually go back where you came from. And when you do, we'll pretend this embarrassing chapter never happened." I couldn't speak. The humiliation was so complete, so devastating, that I felt like I might collapse right there on the marble floor. Some guests were staring with obvious discomfort, others were whispering behind their hands, and a few were actually smiling as if they were enjoying the show. Even worse, I could see Anthony in the distance, frozen in place, clearly torn between defending me and not wanting to cause a scene at his own wedding. Without a word, I turned and walked away. My legs felt unsteady, and I had to concentrate on putting one foot in front of the other. I made my way through the crowd, past the staring faces and whispered comments, and out through the French doors that led to the gardens. The night air was cool against my burning cheek, and I finally allowed the tears to fall. I found a stone bench in a secluded corner of the garden, surrounded by rose bushes and far enough from the reception that I couldn't hear the music or laughter. I sat down heavily, my body shaking with silent sobs. Maybe Catherine was right. Maybe I didn't belong in William's world. Maybe I was fooling myself to think that love could overcome such a vast difference in backgrounds. I thought about my little apartment, my teaching job, my simple life before William. It hadn't been glamorous, but it had been mine. I'd had dignity there, respect from my colleagues and students. Here, I was just an outsider who would never be accepted. The worst part was that this had happened at Anthony's wedding. William valued his friendship and business partnership so much, and now I'd caused a scene that would overshadow what should have been a perfect day. Catherine was Anthony's sister, and family loyalty would always come first. I had no doubt that William would have to choose between supporting me and maintaining his most important business relationship. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't hear footsteps approaching until a familiar voice said my name. "Florence." I looked up to see William standing a few feet away, his face illuminated by the garden lights. But something was different about his expression. There was a coldness there, a controlled fury that I'd never seen before. He wasn't looking at me with pity or concern. He was looking at me with the calculating intensity of a man who had just witnessed something unforgivable. "How long have you been out here?" I asked, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "Long enough," he replied, his voice quiet but carrying an edge that made me shiver. "I saw everything, Florence, every single word, every cruel comment, and especially what happened at the end." I felt a new wave of humiliation wash over me. "William, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I bumped into Catherine and spilled wine on her dress, and then she was so angry." "Stop!" William's voice was sharp, and he held up a hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. What happened in there was not your fault, and I will not have you taking responsibility for Catherine's behavior." He sat down beside me on the bench, and I could see the fury still burning in his eyes. "Do you know what I was doing when Catherine struck you?" "I was finishing a conversation with Anthony about expanding our partnership into international markets, discussing millions of dollars in potential deals. But I kept one eye on you throughout the entire evening because I've seen how some people in our circle treat those they consider beneath them." I stared at him in surprise. "You've been watching?" "I've been observing," he said simply. "Every snide comment, every cruel joke, every time someone has made you feel unwelcome. I've been keeping track of it all, Florence, because I knew this day would come. I knew eventually someone would cross a line so completely that I would have justification for what I'm about to do." "William, what are you talking about?" He stood up and straightened his jacket, and suddenly he looked every inch the billionaire businessman that he was. I'm talking about consequences, Florence. Real, lasting consequences for people who think they can abuse someone I love and get away with it. But Catherine is Anthony's sister, your business partner's sister. William, you can't risk your friendship and partnership over this. Anthony's sister just publicly humiliated and physically assaulted my wife, William interrupted. She did it in front of dozens of witnesses, including several people who record everything on their phones. By tomorrow morning, videos of tonight's incident will be all over social media. Catherine has just destroyed her own reputation, and more importantly, she's put Anthony in an impossible position. I felt a mixture of fear and excitement at the cold determination in his voice. What are you going to do? I'm going to give Anthony a choice, he said. He can either address his sister's behavior appropriately, or he can find a new business partner, because I will not continue to work with someone whose family thinks they can abuse my wife without consequences. My eyes widened. William, you can't throw away your partnership over this. I'm not throwing it away, he said firmly. I'm setting boundaries. Anthony is a smart businessman, and he'll understand that some things are more important than family loyalty, like respect, dignity, and basic human decency. He offered me his arm, and I took it, feeling a strange mixture of nervousness and anticipation. What Catherine doesn't understand is that she's not just dealing with you anymore, she's dealing with me, and I didn't build a billion-dollar empire by allowing people to disrespect what's mine. As we walked back toward the reception hall, William continued talking in that same coldly controlled voice. You need to understand something, Florence. I didn't marry you because I felt sorry for you, or because you were convenient. I married you because you're kind, intelligent, compassionate, and genuine, all qualities that are extremely rare in the world I grew up in. You make me a better person, and you've brought more joy into my life than any business deal ever could. We paused at the French doors, and he turned to face me. What's about to happen in there might be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Anthony's sister has spent tonight treating you like an outsider and a gold digger. She's about to learn that attacking my wife means attacking me, and I'm not someone who accepts attacks lying down. We walked back into the reception hall together, and I immediately noticed that the atmosphere had changed. Conversations died as we passed, and people stared at us with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Word had clearly spread about the incident, and everyone was wondering what would happen next. Catherine was near the bar, having changed into a different dress, this one borrowed from one of her friends. She was surrounded by a small group of supporters, and I could hear her voice carrying across the room as she continued to complain about my clumsiness and general unsuitability as a guest at her brother's wedding. Anthony was standing with Rachel near the head table, both of them looking uncomfortable and uncertain. I could see the conflict in Anthony's face, torn between loyalty to his sister and his friendship with William. William guided me to the center of the dance floor and asked the band to stop playing. The room fell silent as he stepped forward to address the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying easily across the room. I want to thank Anthony and Rachel for including us in their beautiful celebration tonight. It's been educational. He paused, and his gaze swept across the room, lingering on Catherine and her friends. I also want to address something that happened earlier this evening. Many of you witnessed Catherine physically assault my wife over an accidental spill of wine. Some of you seem to find this entertaining. The silence in the room was deafening. Catherine's face had gone pale, and she was staring at William with growing alarm. Anthony looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I want to be very clear about something, William continued. Florence is my wife, my partner, and my priority. She has brought nothing but grace, kindness, and dignity to every event we've attended together. Anyone who cannot treat her with the respect she deserves is not someone I can continue to associate with. He turned to look directly at Anthony. Anthony, you're my friend and business partner. We've built something incredible together, and I value our relationship deeply. But I need you to understand that what happened here tonight cannot be ignored or forgotten. Anthony stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment. "William, I'm so sorry. Catherine was out of line, and Catherine was more than out of line," William interrupted. "She was abusive. The question now is, what are you going to do about it?" The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone understood that this was about more than just a family dispute. This was about business, money, and power. William's ultimatum was clear. Anthony had to choose between his sister's behavior and his partnership with one of the most successful businessmen in the country. Anthony looked around the room, his eyes moving from his sister to his new wife to his business partner. The weight of the decision was visible on his face. Finally, he spoke. "Catherine, what you did tonight was unacceptable. You embarrassed our family, you embarrassed Rachel on her wedding day, and you assaulted a guest at our celebration. I'm ashamed of your behavior, and I won't defend it." Catherine's face crumpled. "Anthony, she's just a teacher. She doesn't belong here, and you know it." "She belongs here because William invited her," Anthony replied firmly. "And more importantly, she belongs here because she's his wife. Your behavior tonight was disgraceful, and I'm asking you to leave." The room erupted in gasps and whispered conversations. Catherine stared at her brother in shock, clearly unable to believe that he was choosing his business partner over his own sister. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Anthony, I'm your sister. We're family." "Family doesn't behave the way you did tonight," Anthony replied. "William is my partner, my friend, and you attacked his wife. That's not something I can overlook, even for you." William stepped forward, his expression still cold but showing a slight satisfaction. "Anthony, I appreciate your response. It shows the kind of character that made me want to do business with you in the first place." He turned to address the room again. "Catherine will be leaving now. I trust that everyone here understands that this kind of behavior is unacceptable in civilized society. Those who witnessed what happened tonight and did nothing to stop it should examine their own consciences." Catherine looked around the room desperately, but no one would meet her eyes. Even her friends had backed away, clearly not wanting to be associated with someone who had just been publicly expelled from her own brother's wedding. "This isn't over," she said quietly, gathering what remained of her dignity. "You'll regret this." "The only thing I regret," William replied calmly, "is that it took this long for someone to hold you accountable for your behavior." As Catherine made her way toward the exit, the room slowly began to buzz with conversation again. But the dynamic had fundamentally changed. People were looking at me differently now, not with pity or condescension, but with something approaching respect. They had just witnessed a demonstration of power, and they understood that I was under the protection of someone who would not tolerate disrespect. Anthony approached us, his face still flushed with embarrassment. "William, Florence, I can't apologize enough for what happened tonight. Catherine has always been difficult, but tonight she crossed every line." "I appreciate you standing up for what's right," William replied. "It couldn't have been easy, but it was necessary." "Our partnership means a lot to me," Anthony continued, "but more than that, your friendship means a lot to me. I won't let family loyalty blind me to what's right and wrong." Rachel appeared beside her new husband, tears in her eyes. "Florence, I'm so sorry. No one should have to endure what you went through tonight, especially not at our wedding." "It's not your fault," I replied, finally finding my voice again, "and I'm sorry that it happened at your celebration." "Don't apologize," Rachel said firmly. "What happened here tonight wasn't your fault, and I'm glad William stood up for you. That's what marriage should be, protecting each other." As the evening progressed, I watched the social dynamics shift around us. People who had barely acknowledged me before were now approaching with friendly smiles and genuine apologies for not speaking up earlier. It was fascinating and somewhat disturbing to see how quickly attitudes could change when the balance of power shifted. The rest of the reception proceeded smoothly, but the incident had cast a long shadow over the celebration. William stayed close to me for the remainder of the evening, and I could feel his protective presence like a shield around me. As we finally left the reception, I felt emotionally drained, but also strangely empowered. For the first time since marrying William, I felt like I truly understood the power he wielded and his willingness to use it to protect me. The drive home was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. It wasn't until we were back in our bedroom that I finally spoke. "William, what you did tonight, it was incredible. But I need you to know that I never wanted you to risk your business relationships because of me. Anthony is your closest friend and most important partner." He turned to face me, his expression serious. "Florence, you need to understand something. I didn't risk my relationship with Anthony. I strengthened it. A man who would choose his sister's cruel behavior over basic human decency isn't someone I want as a partner. Anthony proved tonight that he has the character and integrity I thought he had. He took my hands in his, and you need to understand that you're not a burden or a risk to my business. You're my wife, my partner, and my priority. Any business relationship that requires me to tolerate abuse directed at you is not a relationship worth having." But Catherine was so angry, so certain that I don't belong. "Catherine was wrong," William interrupted. "You belong wherever I am, wherever we are together. You don't need to earn that right, and you certainly don't need to tolerate abuse to keep it." He pulled me into his arms. "I love you, Florence. Not because you're perfect, not because you come from the right family or have the right background. I love you because you're kind to children, because you see the good in people, because you make me want to be a better man. You bring authenticity and warmth to a world that often lacks both." "I love you too," I whispered, feeling tears in my eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude and love, not humiliation. "Good," he said, holding me close, "because tomorrow we're going to wake up to a world where everyone knows that you're not just my wife. You're someone who is loved and protected. And anyone who wants to do business with me or be part of our lives needs to understand that respecting you isn't optional." As I fell asleep that night, I reflected on everything that had happened. It had been one of the most difficult and humiliating experiences of my life, but it had also been transformative. I'd learned that I didn't need to earn acceptance from people who were determined to reject me. I'd learned that true strength sometimes means allowing the people who love you to stand up for you. And most importantly, I'd learned that my husband wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful, and he was willing to use that power to protect me. The next morning, I woke up to find that William had been right about the social media aspect. Videos of Catherine slapping me had indeed gone viral, and the comments were overwhelmingly supportive of me and critical of her behavior. The story had been picked up by several news outlets, and Catherine's reputation was in ruins. But more importantly, I woke up feeling different. I felt like I finally belonged in my own life, in my own marriage. The little girl who had been afraid of not fitting in was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to demand respect. Anthony called that morning to check on me and to reiterate his apologies. He also mentioned that Catherine had left town, too humiliated to face the consequences of her actions. Their family was dealing with the fallout, but Anthony made it clear that he stood by his decision to ask her to leave the wedding. William's actions had sent a clear message to everyone in our social circle. Florence was not to be trifled with, not because she was vindictive or cruel, but because she was loved and protected by someone who wouldn't tolerate abuse directed at her. Looking back, I realized that night changed everything. It wasn't just about Catherine's cruelty or William's protection. It was about understanding that love isn't just about the quiet moments and romantic gestures. Sometimes love means standing up in public, making difficult choices, and showing the world that some things are worth fighting for. What would you have done in Florence's situation? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible true stories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when karma comes full circle. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.